He appears to Noah in order to buy some of his pottery.
Yes.
Once he buys the pottery, he takes it and he throws it on the ground and he smashes it into 1,000,000 pieces. Noah's horrified, he's upset, he's very offended, and he begins to yell at the person. He says to him, "How is it that you could it took me a long time to make these things. I became really tired. I put a lot of my time and my effort in making this pottery. How dare you just come in here and destroy it like that?" He said, "I bought it. I'm free to do whatever it is that I want to do with it. And I want you to pay attention to something, Noah. Do you see how it is that you're so upset just because you built it with your own hands, that I destroyed it, even though I paid for it and it now belongs to me? Ownership has been transferred to me and I have the right to do what I want. How dare you be upset about that, but you didn't even think twice when you called down the punishment and the flood over creation and you destroyed all that which God had fashioned with his own hand." بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآل محمد الأئمة والمهديين وسلم تسليما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear sister and companion Tiffany.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear Father.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
God bless you. So today we're going to, I think, talk about something which is interesting. And it pertains to a particular mysterious character that appears in the Bible. His name is Melchisédech or Melchisédech, which means basically my king is righteous in Hebrew. This is a character which is quite interesting, actually, because he appears in Genesis for the first time. He appears and he disappears. He's there only for a couple of lines, a couple of verses. And then his name appears later in Psalms, right? And it is thought that it is unsure, actually, it's unclear in that verse if it's talking about the same character or if it's just talking about a righteous king. The language is just referring to David, for example, as a righteous king by saying that my king is righteous, but in reference to David versus making a reference all the way back to that initial character, that man, that individual that has that name. And then obviously it's written about him in Hebrews, in which there is this kind of parallel drawn between him and Jesus.
Yeah, that Jesus is like a king in the line of Melchisedech, like he's the successor of Melchizedek.
Yeah, that he's like the successor, that he's the new Melchizedek, that he's the replacement of Melchizedek for forever.
Yes.
And so in order to figure out who this mysterious character is, or to shed light at least in the attempt on the story itself, we're going to have to examine the elements of what's going on, and we're going to have to thread together and sew together a little bit of the narrations from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, as we do always.
Okay, I can't wait. Yeah, this is a very important character, and he's, as you said, very mysterious because he pops up kind of out of nowhere. He's the king of Salem, and he has an important role with Abraham. Abraham even gives him like 1/10 of his earnings, and this is the origin of like the tithe. So he plays an important role in religious history, but we don't really know too much about him because not much is written.
So basically what's going on in Genesis is that Abraham is trying to save Lot. What took place is that there was a bunch of cities that fought against a whole bunch of other cities. So there was 5 cities that were fighting against 4 cities. And from those cities that were defeated were Sodom and Gomorrah. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so when the invading cities defeated Sodom and Gomorrah, they captured a bunch of people and took a bunch of war booty. And from those people that they captured was Lot, okay, the nephew of Abraham. And so Abraham felt it was a duty now that he has to save Lot. So he gathers 318 people, according to the Bible, so which is interesting because it's very close to the 313 that were in the narrations with Talut, for example, when he's crossing the river, the 300 men that were with Gideon, the 313 that were with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Battle of Badr, the 313 that are with the Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, or the Qa'im, when they rise. And so you have this kind of like 300 and some odd men that always appear in these battles or skirmishes that take place, in which the victorious side is the side of the prophets and the messengers. And so Abraham manages to defeat the invaders. He defeats them and he frees Lot. And when he does so, all of a sudden, this individual appears, Melchisédech, right? Or Melchisédech. He appears and he basically brings some bread and some wine, and he blesses Abraham, and he identifies himself, or the text identifies him, as being a priest of the highest God, right? He's a priest, the high priest of the highest God. And Abraham, in return, as you mentioned, he pays a tenth of his belongings, his money, his what he owns, to Melchisédech. And this is very significant, because basically what we have here is we have Abraham acknowledging the superiority of Melchisédech over him. And that's why it's such an interesting, fascinating piece, because it means that Melchisédech is actually, he's not from the line of Abraham, but yet he's recognized by Abraham as being somebody who's higher than him. Hence, he paid him the tithe. You don't have somebody paying a tithe to the person that's under you or lower than you, right? In rank, or spiritually in rank, you don't have that. And so Abraham here is recognizing the authority of Melchisédech. And Melchisédech is actually a man of God, and Abraham is recognizing the God of Melchisédech, right? This high God.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now, what's interesting, we're just going to throw some fun facts out there, is that Melchisédech is made up of two words, Meleki and Sadiq or Siddiq, and these are words that are shared both between Arabic and Hebrew. Okay, so when we have the word Meleki, it means king in Hebrew. In Arabic, it also means king. It means my king, right? Yeah. It could also mean angel in Arabic. Okay?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it's angel, it's king. That's what it means in Arabic. In Hebrew, it means king. And then you have Sadiq, it means, or Zaddiq, it means in Hebrew, righteous, okay? And it pretty much means the same thing in Arabic. It means a truthful one, a righteous one. And this is a title that is given to righteous people in Judaism, right? You have these Siddiqeen, and these individuals are, like if you have somebody who's like a saint, for example, you would apply this title of Siddiq to them. And that's why you have the title being applied also in Islam to Joseph. Yusuf is Siddiq. And you also have, for example, in the Quran, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِدْرِيسَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا وَرَفَعْنَاهُ مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا. Okay, so you have this reference also to Enoch, that it says mentioned in the book Enoch, he was a Siddiq, also he was a prophet, and we raised him to a high station. Okay, so you have these titles that are being applied to righteous people. This is the meaning of it in Hebrew and also in the Arabic language.
Okay, that's very interesting fact. I mean, because in English we pronounce it like Melchisédech, so we kind of miss that like significance or meaning in the etymology of the title. Yeah. Now,
when we're exploring and we're seeing the theme of what is occurring in this story, basically we're seeing a mysterious character that's of a higher rank coming in to support the main character, who is the main prophet or messenger. This theme, so to speak, is not foreign to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Actually, we find it appearing a lot within scripture and within the text, within the narrations, and within the hadiths, especially when it has to do with the Islamic Shia narrations. Okay?
Okay.
In the Islamic Shia narrations, what we have is this concept of the prophets and the messengers being visited by or enforced by higher spiritual beings that have wilaya over them. Okay? These people owe them something. They have to tithe to them. They have to acknowledge their spiritual authority, right?
Yeah.
And obviously these individuals that have this higher authority over the prophets and the messengers, they're the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam, all right? And particularly the Ahl Kisa. And that's why we have narrations, for example, that where Imam Ali alayhi salam says, I'm the one that was with the prophets and the messengers. I'm the one that takes from the prophets and gives to the vicegerents, and from the vicegerents to the prophets, etc. Right? You have hadiths in which they're stating that they are the Spirit, they're the Holy Spirit. There are narrations in which Imam Ali alayhi salam shows Salman al-Farisi, he opens up a portal or walks into it and shows Salman al-Farisi in this alternative dimension, this other reality, how it was him actually who took the ring of Solomon off of his finger, and he's the one that initially gave it to Solomon. You know, there are narrations that make it very clear that in the verse of the Quran where it says that it was not you who struck, but it was God that struck in regards to David when he killed Goliath, that this was because of the presence of one of the Ahl Kisa or Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, that in that moment he acted on behalf of David and he's the one that slayed Goliath. You have narrations in which the splitting of the sea by Moses, that act itself is attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, that he's the one that came down and split the sea and was present with them. Okay, so this concept or this notion of there being enforcement, divine enforcement to these prophets and messengers by somebody that's higher than them is very significant, and it's also very present within Shia Islam. Okay. You can't just say, for example, that Melchisédech is he's just an angel that God enforced Abraham with, because we know that from Judaism and Christianity and Islam, these prophets and the messengers, the caliphs of Allah, they are actually above the angels, or at least more of the angels. They're most of the angels. They're the ones that are actually giving the angels commands, right? Like in the very beginning, when God blew into Adam, he commands the angels to prostrate to Adam. That means that Adam is above them. Adam would not be paying those angels a tithe, for example. Right. He would not be recognizing necessarily their spiritual authority, right? So there has to be a significance to any scene that occurs in the Bible where there are individuals appearing as men, or even if they're being referenced as angels, okay, but the main character or the Caliph of Allah is prostrating to them. Then we know, okay, this is not just a normal angel, this is a special angel, or this is a special individual that holds authority over them in the same way that Melchisédech holds authority over Abraham.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can think of a couple of examples, right? Like from the Old Testament, like for example, the angel of the Lord that comes to Abraham and then he prostrates before him, and the angel who comes to Joshua and Joshua bows before him and his face falls to the ground. So there are definitely examples of that, and it makes sense. They're showing the authority of this figure over them. Absolutely.
See, Joshua is one of those characters that's according to Jewish tradition and also Islamic tradition, he commands the sun and it obeys, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So if you're commanding the sun and it obeys, and they believe also the traditions state in Judaism and in Islam that these bodies that move in the sky, the sun, the moon, etc., these are moved by the command of the angels. So he's actually commanding the angels that are moving these celestial bodies, and they're obeying him. So if he comes now and he prostrates to just a normal angel, that don't make sense. It has to be a special angel.
Yes. Wow. Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So now we're getting somewhere, inshallah. So we agree that the traditions make it clear that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, they enforce the prophets and the messengers. We also know from the traditions that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam are spiritually higher than all of the prophets and the messengers. And so that makes sense within an Islamic framework, right? Yes. And narrative. Mm-hmm. We also know that in Christianity and Judaism that there are these individuals, angels or human beings, that are higher spiritually than the highest of the prophets and the messengers. You can't get much higher than an individual like Abraham, right? Yeah. And certainly within Islam, these are what we would call ulil azm prophets, okay? Abraham, Noah, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are the 5 ulil azm prophets. So they're actually chosen above all of the rest of the prophets and the messengers, right? Yes. So mankind is like at one layer. From them, the believers are chosen above the non-believers. From the believers, there's chosen another higher layer that's above them, right? That has authority over them. And so the believers have authority over the non-believers. Now, over the believers themselves, the prophets and the messengers, which are numbered 124,000 prophets and messengers, they have authority over the believers. And from those 124,000 prophets and messengers, 313 messengers are chosen, and they have wilaya or authority even over those 124,000. Just like the narration states that there are 313 angels that are the leaders of all other angels, the same thing here. The 313 messengers are leaders over all of the prophets and messengers. And then you have having authority in a higher station, even above those 313, are those 5 ulil azm prophets, right? And then we said that according to Islamic narrations, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, having reached the rank of 2 bows or less, being the perfect caliph of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has the ultimate authority over all.
Yes. Yes, that makes sense.
Okay. So the Ahlul Bayt, they have authority over the prophets and the messengers, and they have a duty towards the prophets and the messengers because of this concept of there being this wilaya that they were tested with in the Adam world, which we spoke about in the Hall of Mysteries, and we also spoke about in the School of Divine Mysteries. So what we can obviously read from the narrations is that the people, especially the prophets and the messengers, before they were sent in the Adam world, they're tested by the wilaya of Muhammad, by the wilaya of God, by the wilaya of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and by the wilaya of the Mahdi. And those who are tested by the wilaya of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and they succeed and they're chosen as prophets and messengers, they're sent in this physical world as a prophet or messenger. And we see that Imam Ali alayhi salam enforces them. He helps them. He splits open the sea for them. He's present with them because they had believed and acknowledged his authority beforehand in the old world.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. I mean, that's beautiful, and I mean, to me, it makes sense because, you know, as we know, I mean, there is a special enforcement for these prophets and messengers. It's clear that God has favored them and given them abilities at certain moments, and now we understand why, because there's a higher presence with them in those moments, acting through them.
Mm-hmm. And we have many narrations that speak about the angels being present with these individuals, speaking to them, fighting with them, right? Fighting alongside them, the enemy, enforcing them, right? Yeah. But you also have narrations or stories that are highlighted in which the spiritual superiority of these particular angels or beings is highlighted on a very high degree, right? Or in a very clear way. And I'm not just talking about the miracles. So if we put even the narrations of the miracles aside, or the prophets and messengers being responsible, or the Ahlul Bayt being responsible for those miracles that the prophets and messengers are performing, we find another set of narrations in which it is very clear that there are these mysterious figures that appear that teach or guide or bless those individuals. And now I'm going to just stick on the group that we called the ulil azm of the prophets, the best of those prophets, right? Because Abraham was one of them. Yes. And we saw that Abraham had an appearance, there was an appearance in his story by this individual called Melchisédech. So we want to see if there are other mysterious guests, mysterious figures that appear in other narrations of the other ulil azm prophets. And what we find is that the first thing that comes to mind very clearly is Surah Al-Kahf and the story of Moses, and this idea that there's also this mysterious, unnamed individual that is sent, right? He just has a title, like Melchisédech has a title. Yes. My king is righteous, right? Yes. The righteous king. Right over here, you have the righteous servant.
Yes, the righteous servant. Again, that word, yes, righteous.
Exactly.
Wow. Very
So
interesting.
you have this righteous servant in the same way appearing to Moses as the righteous king appeared to Abraham. And over here, the righteous servant is teaching Moses a lesson. Moses is stumbling. He's stumbling in regards to what? In regards to his wilaya, because he's thinking that he is the best, as we previously spoke about, right? In our episode that we recorded yesterday, as well as in the Hall of Mysteries, that the stumbling and the mistakes of the prophets and the messengers, it was all due to the fact that they were transgressing against their wilaya, right? And so this person comes to correct that stumbling that Moses has and teaches him that actually he's not the most smartest person alive, that there are other smart people alive. God sends him to meet this righteous servant, and the righteous servant takes him on that infamous story where there are these 3 stations in which Moses is shocked by the knowledge of the righteous servant, where he puts a hole in the ship and he kills a youth, and he basically builds a wall in a tyrannical city. And then in the end, he reveals to Moses the meanings behind these 3 acts. And so it's not really the focus of our story. These 3 acts is just the appearance of the individual, the righteous servant, and him having this superiority, this spiritual and intellectual superiority over Moses. That's important, because here we have Abraham submitting to the righteous king. Here we have Moses submitting to the righteous servant, right? Yes. So that's a very interesting parallel that takes place.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
When we go to a book called Kashkul Dastarib, okay, we have this very interesting story that appears in there pertaining to Noah, you know, and it's talking about how after the flood settles and Noah and his people begin to populate the earth once again, Noah takes up a job, and the job that he takes up is one of a maker of pottery. Mm-hmm. Right? He makes these jars and containers and different things, pots and whatnot. And he loves it, and he's obsessed with his art, and he's becoming very artistic with it. And one day, the narration states that God sends an angel in the form of a man, right? It actually says he sends a man, and then between parentheses, it says an angel, right? So it's either a man that the reader or the writer of the hadith is assuming is an angel, or it was an angel that appeared in the form of a man. Nonetheless, here's another mysterious character that's also unnamed that appears to Noah, and he appears to Noah in order to buy some of his pottery. Yes. Once he buys the pottery, he takes it and he throws it on the ground and he smashes it into 1,000,000 pieces. Noah's horrified, he's upset, he's very offended, and he begins to yell at the person. He says to him, how is it that you could it took me a long time to make these things. I became really tired. I put a lot of my time and my effort in making this pottery. How dare you just come in here and destroy it like that? He said, I bought it. I'm free to do whatever it is that I want to do with it. And I want you to pay attention to something, Noah. Do you see how it is that you're so upset just because you built it with your own hands, that I destroyed it, even though I paid for it and it now belongs to me? Ownership has been transferred to me and I have the right to do what I want. How dare you be upset about that, but you didn't even think twice when you called down the punishment and the flood over creation, and you destroyed all that which God had fashioned with his own hands, okay? So the point of the story here is that here, just like with Moses, just like with Abraham, a figure of spiritual superiority appears to Noah, okay? Yes. And Noah has to submit to, he begins to weep. And the story says that actually this is one of the reasons why Noah gets the name Noah, right? Which means somebody who weeps all the time, because he began to weep and weep and weep for the rest of his days over this story that he was taught by this man angel, this mysterious character of higher superiority, this righteous, buyer, let's say, who or customer that appears at his pottery shop.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So now we have a story for Abraham, for Noah, for Moses. Each of them has this encounter or experience with a figure who is greater than them, and the purpose of that figure is that they come forward to teach them a lesson. That's very interesting.
It is very interesting. And I think that the same thing we find also with Jesus. And Jesus, you find him teaching or being the teacher even of the prophets and messengers. That's why you have in the scene of the transfiguration of Christ to the appearance of Moses and Elijah by his side, right? And they're right there next to him as if they were servants of his, right? They're just listening to him. And so obviously, without a shadow of a doubt, Moses and Elijah, they were also in their times commanders of angels, having been hujjas of Allah, and Jesus also. And Jesus makes it very clear in the narrations of Islam and also in the Bible itself that, if he wills, he could command lots of angels to come down and basically destroy all the non-believers and save him from this thing that he's in. And yet we find him having a moment of weakness in the garden when he begins to feel like he wants this duty or this task to be removed from him. So once again, we find here a wavering in the wilaya of Jesus, a momentary weakness where he is saying, but it's less serious than the rest of the other prophets and messengers' mistakes. But nonetheless, he says in that moment, let this cup pass from me. But if it's your will, then khalas, I'm willing to go ahead and go through with this crucifixion, but I really don't want to, So in that momentary weakness, what happens is that God sends an angel to come down and comfort Jesus, right?
Yes.
So now you have an angel who is more focused on the mission. He is the source of comfort for Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And so when somebody becomes the source of something for somebody else, then it means that he's superior to that person. You can't take comfort from somebody who's less comfortable than yourself or has less comfort than even you do, right?
Yeah,
you can't get courage or draw courage from somebody who is less courageous than you are. You have to look to the person who's more courageous than you are. So here, obviously, clearly demonstrated in the story, we have Jesus encountering somebody who is superior to him.
Yes, definitely. That makes perfect sense. I mean, he clearly... it's clear from the description and from the scenario that this angel must be above Jesus. And Jesus, in that moment where basically his will is not necessarily aligning with the will of God, this is the moment when the angel appears in order to enforce him and to comfort him. So it's very clear.
It is very clear. And it's interesting.
Yeah.
Because this idea of like there being an angel that comes to comfort is also not one that is foreign to the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad alayhi salam. We actually have this narration in which it says that in the very beginning, when God established this very big test that we've been speaking about, the test of the wilaya, when he took the covenant upon the prophets and the messengers, the narration states that he took one of the angels that was a very high angel that was very close to him. So he's like a priest of the Lord in the angels, right? He takes him and he basically makes him swallow the covenant that he took upon the creatures, right? So he becomes the angel of the covenant. And then the narration states that when Adam broke his covenant, okay, so Adam more than stumbled, he broke his covenant, but his mistake has to do with the covenant. So when Adam broke his covenant and he was kicked out of paradise and he came down to earth, God sent the angel of the covenant to comfort Adam, the narration says, in the form of a stone. It was a white pearly, shining stone that eventually the narration state became black because of the sins of the people. So here, once again, we have an angel that is being sent to comfort Adam. And then it even says that Adam, when he sees the angel, he raises the stone and remembers who he is eventually and raises him and carries him above his head, right? Signifying that he is superior to him. Okay, so you have this theme that is occurring once again, where there is a prophet or a messenger that stumbles, that encounters a helper, a supporter, a righteous, mysterious figure, okay, to comfort him, and that this individual is helping him in regards to his wilaya, making sure that he still succeeds, reminding him of his covenant, just like the rest of these stories, right? And this individual in this case is an angel from above that appears in the form of the stone.
Okay. That story really touches my heart, and I see the clear pattern that the figure in all of these stories is almost like an ambassador of God. You know, he's like the representative of God who's coming down, and he's showing God's mercy, and he's teaching these important characters, important lessons. And it's actually very beautiful when you think about it like that.
It is very beautiful. And so who is this mysterious figure that's appearing with all of them? Is it one individual? Is it many individuals? Is it the same individual? Is Melchisédech the same person who went and comforted Adam when he first fell? Is he the angel of the covenant? Is Melchisédech the same as the righteous servant who appeared to Moses to teach him about the lessons that he taught him in Surah Al-Kahf? Is he the same individual that comforted Jesus? Is he the same individual that taught Noah the lesson that he taught him about creation? I think that there have been people that have contemplated over the fact that some of these individuals, if not all of them, might be one and the same. And that's why you have writings in Islam that have kind of guessed or assumed or put forward the theory that Melchisédech is actually Al-Khidr, and that he's the same Khidr that met with Moses, and they said that his superiority over Abraham is the same as the superiority of Al-Khidr over Moses. And so God is using Al-Khidr in that way. And obviously the Islamic scholars have differed over the individual Khidr. Who is he? Is he a prophet? Is he a messenger? Is he just some sort of creature of God's? Is he an angel? What is he? But they recognized that he was the teacher of the prophets and the messengers.
Yes.
We also have people that have contemplated, scholars that have contemplated over whether or not Melchisédech is Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, the 12th Imam, and that he's whether or not the righteous servant that appeared to Moses is also Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, and that he's the individual that's appearing in all of these stories as a higher moral, spiritual figure. And the reasons why they assumed that is because obviously he has a very long life, and they believe that Imam al-Mahdi can travel back and forth in time and through the dimensions, and that he's in an occultation now. Hence the many narrations that speak about him and him being with Elijah, him being with Jesus, him being with Al-Khidr. And they consider Imam al-Mahdi to be better than all of those individuals. And so obviously if you're going to have somebody that's better than Jesus or better than Abraham or better than Moses, who better than Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam? And this was something that they kind of subliminally hinted at, but not so subliminal, in the series of Yusuf al-Sadiq, when they had this old character that was appearing over and over again with Joseph to enforce him or to teach him and appeared in the very end of the story when the brothers and the father were prostrating and reunited with Joseph at the conclusion of the story. You have this old man that would appear, and there's the same old man that appeared to Joseph several times throughout the series. This was kind of the makers of the series were trying to insinuate that this was Imam al-Mahdi, the 12th Imam, appearing to them.
I mean, it would make sense, and it's also providing a sort of like foreshadowing, right? And we talked about that in previous episodes, how there's this concept of like foreshadowing, typology, and these hints at the future that appear in the scriptures of the past. So the appearance of this character throughout history with all of the different covenant bringers, being the one who brings the final covenant, being the one who is like the savior figure who all the prophets and messengers return alongside Imam al-Mahdi, it would make a lot of sense, actually.
It would make a lot of sense. There's only one thing that wouldn't make sense about it, really, and that is that the Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, he is one of the 14 infallibles according to 12 Shia Islam. And he's really like, he's at the same rank as the Ahl al-Kisa, right? And we know from Islam, from the Quran, from the Shia narrations, that when we tithe to the Ahl al-Kisa, like we tithe a fifth, not a tenth. Okay? Yes. So this is the thing that is a little bit confusing, because the tithing that takes place with Melchisédech and Abraham, it's a tenth, it's not a fifth.
You're right, it is. Yeah, it's different. Yeah.
And when we go to look and see what goes on with this tenth, like who else receives a tenth? If you exhaust all Shia narrations, you don't really find it anywhere, except for in one place. It's a very interesting place, and that is in one of the chapters in Al-Hafta Sharif. Okay, and basically in this particular chapter in Al-Hafta Sharif, it's talking about events that are going to be taking place in the future, in the time of the Qa'im, in the time of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. Okay, and basically Imam Al-Sadiq is telling Al-Mufaddal ibn Umar that there are these particular signs that are going to take place. And then he mentions that one of those signs that are going to take place is that Al-Hussein enters into Hilwan, right, which is a particular area in Iraq. Okay, and once he enters into Hilwan, other signs take place. And then it says that, and then there emerges a man from the sons of my father. Okay, so obviously this is a person from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad alayhi salam, because it's a man from the sons of my father, and the narrator is Imam Al-Sadiq alayhi salam. So then there's somebody that emerges, and it becomes unclear. The identity of this individual is mysterious. It never says. It just says that he's a man from the sons of my father. All right, but it doesn't say who the character is. It doesn't say if the character is the Yamani himself, or if it's Al-Hussein himself. It doesn't say if he's somebody else, if he's Imam al-Mahdi. But this individual begins to say that he goes back into Basra, Iraq, and he takes over Basra by night. Okay, and he begins to fight and destroy all of the people. Great battles take place, and he captures and kills a lot of people from those individuals, all right, that are supposed to be real non-believers. They're forced at some point, okay, to pledge allegiance and accept the authority and the presence of this individual, but they do so while forced.
Okay.
And then the narration says, and they pay to him the 10th, not the 5th. But then a little bit later, it starts talking about the 5th in regards to the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam in a different context. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a very clear distinction.
It's a very clear distinction, and that is the only place that you get a man from the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, a man from the children of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, having wilaya over a people, and them paying him a 10th. This is the only place that you get it. There, and then you never get anything else about a 10th until you go towards the Bible and you start looking into the story of Melchisédech and the tithing. So obviously there's something that's taking place here, and there's a few different conclusions that one can draw. One can draw the conclusion that these individuals, they were basically tricking the Imam, or tricking the man, and instead of paying, they were supposed to pay the 5th but instead of paying the fifth, they only paid a tenth. So they withheld some of the fifth and they only paid a tenth. But there's no evidence to support that. Like there's nothing in the text itself that says that he demanded from them a fifth. It just says that they paid to him a tenth. All right. So he doesn't expose it. He doesn't object to it. It doesn't say that he demanded other than that. The assumption is actually that he demanded a tenth in that way. And that's the reason why they paid a tenth, because they didn't want to pay anything. They don't even want him in their city. Okay. Yes. So that's not really like a valid theory so much. And then you could draw the conclusion that perhaps it is the Qa'im. And there's a couple different reasons why one might think that it would be the character of the Qa'im. And the reasons would be that basically he is the one that in the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad is fighting the battles. He's the one that the people are objecting to. He's the one that the people of Iraq in particular are fighting against. And they say, go back, O son of Fatima. We have no need for you here, right? He's the one that comes after the Yamani. And obviously for us, the Yamani is Al-Hussein. So if we assume that these are two distinct characters, which the text kind of indicates that it is, then it would mean that this would make sense because he's the one that engages in physical fighting and he's the one who the people have to pledge allegiance to forcefully. Even some narrations say that the people forcefully go into his authority or under his rule due to two things. So that is greed in regards to what he has or fear of his sword. So we find that the same elements in the narrations when describing the rule of the Qa'im is applicable in this story to this individual. Yeah. We also have a reason why his name might not be named, and that's because the narrations say that we're not to name the name of the Qa'im until he rises or until he appears. So it's kind of haram to do so, right? Okay. And so you have these elements are there, and for that reason, it makes sense. It also makes sense that it would be the Qa'im because the Qa'im is the one who kind of works by the sunnahs of the previous prophets and messengers. So one could say that the Qa'im here is obviously working by the sunnah of Melchisédech by implementing the 10th. So he's actually implementing in the people of Iraq a sunnah that belonged to somebody, a hujjah, that came from the time of Abraham before. Yeah. And I think that that is a logical conclusion. And then the only other conclusion that we could draw from this is that perhaps the Qa'im himself is Melchisédech, or Melchisédech is this individual that's being referred to, and that this is a little clue that was left to us in the text when people are trying to figure out the identity of who this individual is. They can look and see, okay, he's getting a tithe of a tenth. Who else gets a tithe of a tenth? And the most famous person that gets a tithe of a tenth, that's also a mysterious, unnamed character, is Melchisédech that appears with Abraham in the book of Genesis.
Yes.
And so I'll just leave the conclusion for the individuals to draw. But what we do know is that we know that each and every one of these individuals that came in the story of Abraham, story of Noah, story of Jesus, story of Moses, all of these individuals were obviously and clearly individuals that had authority, had wilaya over these prophets and messengers, and that they enforced and endorsed them and corrected their path. And there's nobody that's higher than these individuals except for Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. So it had to be somebody from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad alayhi salam.
Yes. I think the connections, from my perspective, the connections are undeniable. There's a very clear connection between the figure that comes forward in all of these different stories with Adam, with Abraham, with Moses and Jesus. And I think that it's very clear that we're talking about an individual, but I leave it, as you said, we leave it inconclusive for the people to contemplate over. But I think that that from my perspective, you can't deny that there is a clear connection going on here.
Yeah, and I think that that's the most important part that we just want to end on, and that is that there are these mysterious figures that appear, and they're enforcing them, and that there's nobody that's higher than the prophets and the messengers except for Muhammad and the family of Muhammad alayhi salam. Okay, and the Christians and the Jews, they have no other explanation that makes as much sense as that does. And I know that the Christians kind of allude to or ponder over the fact that maybe Melchisédech is Jesus Christ himself.
Yes.
And that would make sense about who's the comforter that's above Jesus that enforces Jesus, right? So there's no real evidence that it is Jesus that's Melchisédech. It makes more sense that it's actually Muhammad and the family of Muhammad that comfort Jesus and also teach Noah and also correct Moses and also bless Abraham. Thank you so much, Tiffany, and God bless you.
Thank you, Father.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Wow, that is another incredible episode. And I know that Al-Sadiq, from him is peace, he left things inconclusive and he left it up to the viewers to contemplate over. And I thought that I would just like to bring forward some of the things that I noticed from what he taught us today. I think that it's very clear that there's only one figure that has this connection to the term Sadiq or truth, and that is Al-Sadiq, and he is the Qa'im. It's also written in the narrations that the Qa'im is the riser because he is the one that rises with the truth. And then we have the connection to Melchisédech or Melchisédech having this term Sadiq within the title. And I think that that's a very important clue. We also know that Metatron is the angel of the covenant, right? And Enoch, it's written in the book of Enoch that Enoch is the angel Metatron. So Enoch is the angel of the covenant. And it is presumable that that is the same angel of the covenant who comforted Adam and came to Adam. And it is not a coincidence that we have this angel of the covenant coming to each of the different covenant bringers throughout time. And the prophets and the messengers who brought forward these previous covenants are the same ones who return with the Qa'im in order to support him. It's clear that there's this relationship between the prophets and the messengers and the Qa'im, that he is the one who has authority over them and they submit to his authority. And the proof just goes on, this fascinating connection between the Qa'im being the one who gets a tenth from the people, written in Al-Hafta Sharif, and what is written in Genesis about Melchisédech or Melchisédech, that he is given a tenth of Abraham's wealth as a tithe. I mean, the connections are undeniable, and I think that there's a lot of important information for the people to contemplate over. I hope that you'll give it some thought and join us again next time on the School of Divine Mysteries.